Hello and welcome to our look ahead at what the papers will be bringing us today. And with me, the journalist and author Matthew Green and the education editor of the Sunday Times, Sian Griffiths. Now let's look at the front pages first of all. And the Observer leads with what it calls the global fury in reaction to Donald Trump's immigration ban, preventing people from 7 mainly Muslim countries from entering the United States. The Sunday Times says Donald Trump's visit to the UK could be disrupted as the US president is engaged in a reportedly extraordinary diplomatic row with Prince Charles over his stance on climate change. The Express says Prince William and Harry are to unveil a statue of Princess Diana in the grounds of Kensington Palace to mark the 20th anniversary of her death. And the Daily Mail reports that NHS doctors have been advised in guidelines from the BMA not to call pregnant women mothers because it might offend transgender people. And the Telegraph leads with comments from the Northern Ireland Secretary, James Brokenshire, who tells the paper the system for investigating murders committed during the Troubles is not working. So let's begin, and we're going to start with the Observer. And I think, all of the papers this morning reflecting on what Donald Trump has done.
Indeed, America is clearly on the brink of a precipice. We're seeing paranoia and fear of the kind that accompanied the internment of Japanese Americans in World War II. But what does this mean for Britain? We've seen Theresa May essentially cozying up to Trump in the hope that she might somehow provide some sort of restraining influence. But we've seen that hope spectacularly blown out of the water by what's happened over the last day with these thousands of refugees and migrants. And the Observer, with all credit to them, has laid it bare on the front page. Trump is ignorant, prejudiced and vicious in ways that no American leader has been. And I think Theresa May's refusal to join other European leaders condemning what Trump is doing is a huge stain on her premiership and could be a defining moment for her.
Sian, a lot of the criticism of Theresa May has been the fact that she said let America can do what America wants to do, rather than condemning it. Is she sort of stuck between a rock and a hard place if we were playing devil's advocate in this?
Well, I suppose in a way she is, because she very much wants to sign, trade deals with America post-Brexit. And she has come out this morning, the spokesman has said very clearly that Britain does not agree with Trump's stance.
But she didn't do it herself.
She didn't do it herself. But then if you look at the papers this morning, I think the Observer is the only paper that has splashed on this morning. And all credit to the Observer. They've got very quickly to this issue and, made seen how big it's going to be. But to be fair to her, she has come through this morning. She's made that statement. She's obviously saying if there are British citizens who are caught up in this with dual nationality, then, we will be looking to represent them. And indeed, she's going to have difficulty. You're absolutely right, Matthew, because already this morning members of her party are saying, look, this is wrong, we don't agree with it. Sarah Wollaston has come out. Ruth Davidson has said quite clearly that this is wrong. In fact, we understand, there is one Iraqi-born Tory MP who may be banned from the States under this, under these new rules.
We saw Theresa May at the press conference in Turkey ducking the question twice and then making this very weak statement about it's essentially America's business. We need a leader who's willing to stand up for democratic values. And I'm afraid that Theresa May is failing that test. It's not good enough to issue still a very weakly worded statement saying we do not agree with what Donald Trump is doing. US newspapers are calling him a tin pot dictator. America, in the past week, has suffered its ugliest start to any republic in the history of the country. We need to be joining other Western leaders in standing up to this and not cravenly endorsing it.
It's a completely new era, though, isn't it, in politics, right across the world?
It is, but has Theresa May grasped this? She's surrounded by these special advisors that the papers constantly talk about being incredibly formidable and intelligent. Maybe she should consult a psychologist who will tell her that Donald Trump is suffering from narcissistic personality disorder. He is megalomaniacal, vainglorious, prejudiced, vengeful. We've seen it all clearly. It's totally obvious. It's not politics as usual, and Theresa May needs to catch up with that.
And Sian, let's move on to the Sunday Times, because it's not just the rest of the world he's fighting with, it's also Prince Charles. What's happened?
Yes. Well, this is a great story. So this story is that Donald Trump seems to be engaged in an extraordinary diplomatic row with the Prince of Wales over climate change, and is actually threatening to disrupt his forthcoming state visit to the UK. And of course, on the one hand, you have Prince Charles, environmental campaigner, and then on the other hand, Donald Trump, who is a climate change denier. And there are some amazing quotes in this story in the Sunday Times. I've just highlighted a few of them here. Apparently, Trump's people are saying that he's really reluctant to meet Prince Charles, and they have warned that it would be counterproductive for Charles to, quote, lecture Trump on green issues, and that Trump would erupt if he were pushed. And then on the other hand, you've got Charles's people saying, well, he's determined to meet Donald Trump, and it's not okay that Donald Trump's people are saying, well, he wants to meet William and Harry.
Well, it's going to be a great visit, this, isn't it?
Well, quite. This is Donald Trump who's tweeted about how wouldn't anyone want to make money by tweeting topless photos of Kate Middleton. He's tweeted about his desire he would have slept with Princess Diana. I mean, why are we letting him into the country, quite frankly? And actually, I find the tone of the Sunday Times story really quite puzzling, as if Prince Charles is somehow his advocacy on climate change is somehow problematic and going to disrupt this visit. Well, let's face it, climate change is a threat to the future of organised life on planet Earth. Donald Trump has gagged members of his government, scientists who are working on this, and has essentially confirmed that the Republican Party is now the most dangerous organisation on Earth. So, the idea that Prince Charles is somehow at fault here, I think is wrong. We should be rallying around him and saying, come on, what direction are we taking the world in?
We look forward to this visit, I have to say.
Well, let me just say, I don't think the story at all says that Prince Charles is at fault here. It lays out both sides very clearly.
Very much that Prince Charles is somehow causing a problem to what otherwise will be a wonderful visit.
No, I don't think the tone is that at all. I think it lays out the argument very clearly, and I think actually the very straightforward reporting here. There's one paragraph that says that Trump has repeatedly branded climate change a hoax and a money-making industry, and has said that it was created by and for the Chinese to damage American industry. I think when you have that very sort of straight reporting, you think, okay, you can make up your own mind.
This story could have been written very differently. You've got senior government officials now believe Charles is one of the most serious risk factors for the visit. Prince Charles is the risk factor.
But he might be
Donald Trump is the risk factor.
He can tell Donald Trump all about climate change.
Well, I hope so. And Donald Trump will probably effusively agree with him and tell him he's right, just like he did with Theresa May. That's what narcissists do.
Alternative facts again. Here we go. Right, Telegraph. So we're going back to the Theresa May and President Erdogan in Turkey and the trade deal for that. Now, if we just move those, just tidying up the desk here. There we go. So the viewers can see this one. So we've got this double-page spread there. They shake on trade deals despite fears over human rights. She's getting into a lot of trouble with holding hands and shaking hands, isn't she, over the last couple of days? Sian, what do you make of this, first of all?
Well, yes, so she has agreed a trade deal, always preparing to agree a £100 million deal for fighter jets, which could lead, in fact, to Britain becoming Turkey's main defence partner. But at the same time, she has, given Erdogan a very clear warning on human rights at the same time. But again, it is this need to find closer trade and diplomatic links outside the EU in the wake of Brexit. Yeah.
It's again, Matthew, isn't it? It's this sense of the world order has changed. And
yeah,
have morals gone with it?
Post-Brexit, we're out. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, we never had any morals about selling arms. I mean, look at the billions of dollars we've sent to Saudi Arabia, which is now being used to bomb civilians and hospitals in Yemen. So, yeah, I mean, it's great that the Sunday Telegraph has flagged human rights concerns in the headline there, but it obviously doesn't make any difference to British policy. Let's not be under any illusions. I mean, we're one of the biggest arms exporters in the world. Post-Brexit, as we walk away from the single market on our doorstep, we're going to be even more reliant on selling weapons to anyone who'll buy them. And
I just want to show the viewers this other picture on the corner here with the Trump hand clasp. It's apparently, I've never heard this word before, bathmophobia. This one here, yeah, there we go. So apparently he's got a fear of slopes, and that's why he was holding her hand.
This is a wonderful story, isn't it? And I think that word bathmophobia is going to be one of the words of the year.
It's
isn't
fantastic,
it? Because everyone is talking about this astonishing handshake as they walk along the hand clasp as they walk along the White House colonnade. And, you know, is it a mark of sort of, you know, special affection? But apparently it might just be that he's quite afraid of slopes, and so he just grabbed her hand to kind of steady himself.
Get down the slope.
Yes.
He'll be having that slope taken out at any moment. But he's also supposed to be afraid of touching people, isn't he? Because of germs.
Well,
maybe his fear of slopes was
this
greater.
photo, though, will haunt Theresa May, won't
yeah.
it? I mean, what a disaster. I mean, the whole thing is so embarrassing. I mean, I don't know what the rest of the world must think of Britain right now. If you don't condemn authoritarianism, you become complicit in it. And she's teaching us that lesson, unfortunately.
Let's move away from Theresa May, Donald Trump et al. And move to the Mail. Now, don't call pregnant patients mothers, is the headline there. And why not?
Well, it's because it might offend transgender people.
And do they say they would be offended?
No, but I think a lot of organisations are producing these kinds of guides to inclusive language for their staff. And of course, the Mail on Sunday disagrees with it, calls it a ludicrously politically correct directive. But the argument is that you shouldn't call mothers pregnant. You should call them pregnant people instead of pregnant mothers, because there are transitioning people who might have babies who might be offended. And the Mail
would they not be then mothers if they're having babies? Anyway, no matter what your gender, you're still giving birth. You would still be the mother.
But mother is a sort of feminine word, isn't it? It's a feminine word. And they have actually found somebody. The Mail does have a case study. There is one transitioning person who has become pregnant. Hayden Cross, 20, is legally male. He was born a girl. And he's changing to become a man, but he's put the sex change surgery on hold while he has a baby.
Okay.
So,
Matthew, what do you make of this?
Well, I'd like to read the original document that this Mail on Sunday story is based on. I mean, you know, Mail on Sunday does do some good reporting sometimes, but my question is this a blanket order that the word mothers is now banned? I find that hard to believe. Or is it merely offering language that could be used if you're a doctor treating a transgender patient? And, you know, let's face it, you know, our society is evolving. It's not so long ago that we locked people up over their sexuality. So, yes, it's a complicated area to negotiate. It might make people feel uncomfortable. But people who are born transgender go through incredible anguish and pain, and partly because attitudes in society are so prejudiced still. So, you know, let's at least support doctors if they're trying to move beyond that a little bit. It's very easy for the Mail on Sunday to phone up the outrage brigade and create this sense that we're all kind of under siege from this tiny minority, but I don't buy it.
There's also, I noticed actually in a lot of forums and things now, you're being asked how you would like to be referred, with what pronoun you'd like to be referred.
Absolutely, and I think there's a generation coming up of young people for whom those sort of very strict gender divides are not as strict as they were for our generation. They're much more fluid. I mean, we've carried stories in the Sunday Times where girls' schools, for instance, head teachers of girls' schools have been given guides and told not to call girls girls. So when you're in assembly, you don't say girls go to your lessons, you say pupils go to your lessons. And again, it's because you may have a transgender child. And okay, it may be rare to have a transgender child, but it's only language. I mean, if we can change our language and that stops offence to people, is it such a bad thing?
OK, on to the Telegraph, and this is to do with the inquiries into deaths during the Troubles in Northern Ireland, and the Secretary of State saying that soldiers have been failed, and police have been failed by this inquiry. What do you make of it, Matthew?
Yeah, well, Sunday Telegraph obviously has a very strong military constituency among its readership, so perhaps not surprising to see this as the splash. The minister's saying that this inquiry into the Troubles, into crimes that were allegedly committed up to 40 years ago has gone off the rails. And we've seen this, haven't we, with the Iraq inquiry, which has caused terrible hounding of soldiers and officers in the military. So these things are not being handled well. I mean, let's face it, Northern Ireland was an extremely dirty conflict. There's no doubt that British troops committed crimes. And they should be investigated. But we should also remember that the psychological scars inflicted on tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of British troops who deployed over 30 years are still very alive today. And we need to take that into account.
That would apply, as you were saying, though, wouldn't it, to all inquiries with where you've got soldiers or police taking part in it or have taken part in a conflict.
I mean, yesterday there was a march on Downing Street by about 1,000 veterans, and it was addressed by Dennis Hutchings, who's 75, and he has been charged with attempted murder over a fatal shooting in Northern Ireland in 1974. And I think one of the things that they're pressing for seems to me to make a lot of sense. They want a statute of limitations, and I think there is a time, there should be a time after a conflict where you draw a line, actually, that doesn't go on for years and years and years.
What about the victims of the conflict, though? Who want retribution?
Yeah. This is a problem. We fight these wars and the legacy continues. I mean, Northern Ireland has one of the highest rates of post-traumatic stress disorder in the world. Belfast is a tiny city. The ghosts of that conflict are still very much alive. Yeah. So people have a right to demand the truth.
Maybe a truth and reconciliation.
I mean, it's very emotional, because I grew up through that. Of course, that was my time as a teenager in particular.
But maybe a truth and reconciliation commission.
Yeah, exactly.
So
we've had a different model. Oh well.
Yes. Right. Okay. On that, let's move on. So the Observer on the front page 1 of the Observer, grassroots Labour are revolting on Brexit. Now, this is interesting, isn't it? Because Jeremy Corbyn himself in the past has been a major rebel. And now they've got this 3-line whip and not everybody's happy. So how do you think this is going to play out?
Well, this is the Brexit dilemma, isn't it? The people who are likely to be hit hardest if we crash out of the single market are people who are on lower incomes who will be Labour's natural constituency. So it's not surprising that many of the MPs and grassroots Labour supporters are very unhappy to see Jeremy Corbyn falling in behind Article 50. So that's a dilemma that I don't think is going to be easy to resolve. And
Sian, what does it do for Jeremy Corbyn? And Labour, actually, because they could be stuck in the middle with nothing at the end of this, couldn't they, really?
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, it's just a continuation, isn't it, of the internal warfare that's going on inside the Labour Party. I mean, last night there was this open letter to Corbyn circulating on Facebook, and now 2,000 members in constituency parties have signed it. And that was always, of course, that was where his grassroots support was. So it just further, I mean,
I want to race through the rest of the list because we are beginning to run out of time. A quick look at the Express. The young princes are going to unveil a statue to their mother, Diana, to mark the 20th anniversary, of course, which will be in August. They say it's now as the time is right. Is it a long time coming, do you think, Sian?
I think it is. I think this is a lovely gesture, actually. It's going to be erected in the grounds of Kensington Palace, in a place where the public can go and see it. It will be their permanent tribute to her. It marks the 20th anniversary of her death. Yes, I think it would have been nice to have had it earlier, but at least we're having it now.
Yes, and I think the Queen Mother was about 7 years after she died. But OK, let's jump then to John Hurt tributes. We lost John Hurt.
Can't we talk about how Prince Harry has talked about burying his grief for Diana and actually modelled the very healthy expression of emotion? He's actually a credit to our country.
I would love to,
and he should resist Donald Trump at the front door of Buckingham Palace.
I would love to, but unfortunately we are running out of time. We have to give you your own programme. So let's move to John Hurt. Tributes pouring in all over for John Hurt, obviously very beloved.
Yes, we all remember that scene in Alien, don't we? The chestburster scene where the alien burst out of him and defined a new moment in Hollywood. So, yeah, sad loss.
And Elephant Man as well, of course.
Of course. And actually, if you go and see Jackie, you can see him.
I saw it the other day. He plays the priest in that.
Opposite
and it's that voice, isn't it? Yeah. Astonishing.
And of course he knew he had cancer, so it makes it particularly poignant, I think, when you go and
he's completed, I think, another 3 films, which we've yet to see. Yeah. Finally, the Sunday Times, page 1, Trident's faulty guidance. So, Trident missiles unarmed, going all over the place. This is a rather
embarrassing story, isn't it? It's been running for a few days, but apparently the Trident missile test launch veered off course, heading towards the American mainland before it was detonated in midair. I mean, one assumes it wasn't equipped with a warhead.
No, apparently it wasn't.
But it raises huge questions over the whole purpose of Trident, doesn't it? I mean, this enormously expensive deterrent. And the problem with it is that the technology is evolving so fast, we're soon going to be having underwater drones that can follow the submarine right out of Faslane and render it completely obsolete.
Well, they did say at the time that it did what it was supposed to do when something goes wrong. It veers off and explodes. And the Americans did say that as well. Not on America. It exploded over the water.
It was meant to explode, yeah.
But also, I was reading, was it yesterday or this morning, that part of it is washed up on a beach in the Bahamas?
Well, yeah, but I think I think one of the, and we have a follow-up story, because of course we broke this story last week in the Sunday Times. We have a follow-up story today. And I think what our follow-up shows was that actually this deterrent was blighted by problems with its navigation controls for years before, this particular malfunction. And there's inside the paper, there's a really interesting suggestion that maybe it was the whole system was hacked. And so the reason it malfunctioned was...
That makes me feel so much safer.
It's a whole new
Can we not just
story.
mothball this thing? Or if we must have it, just have it with no warheads. No one was ever going to know, and it's still a deterrent. Because
a whole
if
new-
we ever have to actually press that button, then it's all over for all
It's
of
a
us.
whole new story for another Sunday, and I'm sure we'll be having it. Thanks very much to both
Thank
of you.
you.
It's been great to talk to you. And just a reminder, we take a look at tomorrow's front pages every evening at 10:40 here on BBC News. Bye for now.